Recently, NCBA announced a change to the Washington, D.C. office, with Ethan Lane taking over the role of Vice President of Government Affairs. Cattlemen to Cattlemen reporter Kate Maher had a chance to talk with the man who will oversee the organization's policy efforts in our nation's capital.
Ethan, first of all, congratulations on taking over this role. You've been in D.C. for several years. I know the office is in good hands, but why don't you give us a little bit of background on yourself for our viewers?
So I'm coming up on my 10th year being in D.C. During those 10 years, I've done all kinds of stuff in the political world. Obviously, I started out running some congressional campaigns and doing some issue work on natural resources, working for some ranchers, working for some other industries, lobbying on Capitol Hill on a range of issues, and then found my way to NCBA 4 years ago, where I've obviously been with the Public Lands Council and NCBA's federal lands during that time. And it's given me a really good opportunity to understand a big cross-section of what we do here in Washington, how the sausage gets made, and how we fit into that conversation. You know, there are a lot of different ways to achieve your end goal here in Washington. There's a lot of communication that needs to be done out to the country and to our members, as well as back to members of Congress and other constituencies. And there's a lot of negotiating and discussing that happens that is necessary to find common ground on a lot of these issues. We're at a point in our political cycle where you don't get to just dictate what something looks like. It takes a lot of hard work and finding some compromise and common ground with other groups. And that's how I've spent most of my time in Washington. So that's something I hope I can bring to this role. Obviously, we have a long list of priorities for our members across the country, and I'm excited to apply those skills to some of those issues.
I'm always amazed coming here in D.C. of all the behind-the-scenes stuff that our staff here in D.C. does and how that really impacts our producers. I think it's something that maybe until you see it, you don't really understand it. As you talk about the issues that are going to impact producers from coast to coast, north to south, what are some of those that you're going to be focusing on?
Well, you're right, and I keep saying this, but I can't say it enough. I mean, our Monday morning staff meeting is the most in-depth policy conversation in Washington on the cattle industry, maybe anywhere in the country. And it's a testament to how many different issues we're managing and tracking and pursuing at any one time. Where we see some common ground is in some of these national conversations taking shape on climate, on emissions, on where your food comes from. And we're seeing those trickle down into trade conversations. We're seeing them trickle down into environmental regulatory conversations, endangered species. Fake meat, obviously, is another big tenet of that conversation. So we're at a point where we're really aggressively wanting to illustrate the real story about cattle production and get those real facts out there, because we feel strongly that if this is a science-based conversation, if we can set that tone in a way that consumers know that when they're making that choice at the grocery store to buy a steak, they're making an environmentally sensitive choice, they're making the best choice for the resource, and they're making a choice that supports American families all at the same time. So we have a really good story to tell if we can just correct the record, if we can kind of get out in front of some of these professional organizations that are looking to put this industry out of business. And I don't mean to sound doom and gloom, but that's the reality. And make sure that members on Capitol Hill, congressmen and senators, are also operating with facts, not rhetoric from some other group when they make those critical decisions that impact our industry.
Yeah, and you make a good point about groups that are out to put our industry out of business. And being here in the Beltway, you really see that firsthand. We face a lot of that from people outside the industry. Recently, we've been facing it from some groups that are trying to use our own industry to divide us. You recently wrote a letter about that.
Yep. I did. The Organization for Competitive Markets is who you're talking about, and that is a group staffed by professional political operatives from the Humane Society for the United States. That's where those people came from. That's not a secret. That's not up for debate. And this is kind of hearkening back to what I was talking about earlier. In the political arena, we use a lot of different tools. One of them that other groups have used to great effect is astroturfing. And by that I mean tilting up a group that looks and feels like a real grassroots movement, but in fact is a well-funded operation with a very specific purpose. We feel strongly that that's what OCM is, and they continue to find ways to drive wedges in our industry. Now, they held a rally in Nebraska with concern about cattle prices, and that's something that we feel very deeply. We understand that end of the market is struggling right now. And in any commodity-based market, I started my career in commercial real estate, and I can tell you I've been there firsthand. Being on the downside of a bad market is the worst thing you can imagine. It's a gut punch you don't recover from a really long time. But we need to make sure that we're operating with facts. We need to make sure that the players that are in that debate are honest brokers and truly have the best interests of our industry at heart. So we're going to continue to call balls and strikes. We're going to continue to call out those people that we don't think have the best interest of this industry at heart. Anyone who has an ulterior motive like HSUS that has a stated goal of putting animal agriculture out of business has no place at that table. So wherever we see that, from our position here in Washington, I mean, the reason our producers trust us is because we are their eyes and ears in this national conversation, working with our state affiliates, making sure that we're not just advancing our priorities, but also watching out for landmines where they might exist. And in our opinion, this is sure a big one, and one we're going to continue to call out wherever we see it.
Yeah, and you know, I've spent some time here in DC with the staff here, and it's always nice to go up on Capitol Hill and see the amount of trust that the staff of the representatives have in this office. And you make a good point about that. If you're not here, then where does that conversation go?
Well, right. I mean, and the answer to that is any number of directions, none of which are helpful to us. Because one thing you learn very quickly is if you're not advocating for your priorities specifically, someone else will be up there. I talk about this a lot when I'm out on the road. People say, oh, you know, Washington's broken and it's all full of, you know, dirty lobbyists. Here's the thing that I want to make sure people understand. No matter who you are in the country, no matter what you do, no matter how you spend your time, someone is in Washington lobbying on your behalf. Whether you're contributing to the association that's paying them or whatever else, there's an interest group and a lobbyist for everything in DC, and the cattle industry is no different. We have a large structure here in Washington designed to protect and defend this industry and make sure that we're part of that national conversation. You know, it's part of the reason that we have the pack wall behind us. It's part of the reason that we spend the time that we do building up this infrastructure so that we can be as big a gorilla in that room as possible. I mean, 500 pounds is fine. I want to be 800 pounds because the bigger we are in that national conversation, particularly representing a rural industry, the more opportunity we're going to have to impact that debate.
Yeah, and so how do we get to be that 800-pound gorilla? You mentioned the pack wall. Give us some tools that producers can help you with to be that monster in the room.
So first and foremost, that really is, if you look at that pack wall behind us, I mean, those are names that are familiar to our business. Those are people that we see at our national meetings. Those are family operations and businesses that have made a contribution and commitment to the pack. I mean, I would ask every producer to think about that opportunity because there's no greater weapon in our arsenal than a robust pack. Coming into a contentious election cycle, a contentious presidential election, we have an opportunity to be a real force in that election. And I can tell you, we have DC's attention. This is something that we can use to our advantage to influence that debate and make sure that we're pushing candidates that are going to have our back and that are going to make sure that they hold up this industry's priorities, and we can start to push out those members of Congress that don't have our best interests at heart. And that cuts both ways. It's an important tool. And the more producers engage with that and the more producers prioritize sending, even if it's $20, you know, something to the pack that helps us arm ourselves. I think of it as filling sandbags, right? If everybody fills one sandbag, we can put enough in place to really do something. And that's the most important thing. The other is show up at meetings. I talk about this constantly, but I mean, I'd like to see 3 times the attendance at our meetings that we do, for no other reason than the more voices we have in those policy conversations, the better off we are. Because your view from North Dakota is totally different than the view from Nebraska, and neither of those are going to look anything like the view from California. And we're all in the same industry, we're all trying to achieve the same goal, but we know conditions on the north side of the slope are totally different than on the south side. And if we don't have both of those viewpoints at the table, we're going to miss something. So we need you to show up. We need you to show up to your state affiliate meetings. We need you to have that dialogue going all the time, and we need you to advocate at every opportunity. I mean, you know, we know the facts. We have them on our website. We can get you up to speed on an issue, but our best ambassadors are our producers on the ground. The more they're telling that story, the better off we are.
Yeah. Well, thank you not only to you, but to you and your staff for so passionately serving the interest of all producers in this industry. Really appreciate it, and best of luck as you charge forward for us.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, Ethan.
If you'd like to stay up to date on all the key issues and events from DC, one way is by becoming a member of NCBA. To join, just call 1-866-233-3872 or visit the website ncba.org.